Hey guys, tonight we slip back to a time so dark even the sun seemed to give up. You wake in your little wooden hut clutching a fur that barely keeps the chill away. It's June, at least the calendar says so, but frost rims the edges of your breath. You squint up at the sky, expecting warm light, and instead find it muted. The sun glows like a dying ember behind a gray veil, its rays weak, its heat absent. And the silence. It's louder than usual. No buzzing bees, no rustling grain. Just you, the cold, and a growing dread. Welcome to the year 536 CE. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Are you in the depths of night or sneaking in a midday break? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Europe or maybe Western Asia, it doesn't matter. This is happening everywhere. One morning, the sun just stops behaving. Not gone exactly. Not eclipsed. Just sickly. You hold out your hand expecting the golden warmth of daylight and get a weird twilight glow that makes everything feel wrong. It stays that way, day after day. For 18 straight months, if ancient texts are to be believed. Cassiodorus, a Roman official, writes about this in a tone that's oddly poetic for a man clearly losing his mind. We marvel to see no shadows of our bodies at noon. You might chuckle imagining yourself casting no shadow like a vampire, but the humor fades quickly. Without sunlight, your crops begin to fail. Leaves curl too early. Grains won't ripen. The wheat fields turn anemic. Now imagine you're a peasant who survives year to year by what you can harvest. There's no food bank, no corner store, no backup fridge humming comfortingly in the kitchen. What grows is what you eat, and what doesn't grow, well, that's when you start boiling leather shoes for broth. Historians still argue whether this sun dimming was caused by a massive volcanic eruption, a comet, or some unholy cocktail of both. What's increasingly agreed on, though, is that something huge happened around the start of 536 CE. Tree rings from Ireland to Siberia show stunted growth. Ice cores from Greenland trap tiny particles of sulfur-rich volcanic glass. And you just think the world's ending. En simple. You're not wrong, because it's not just the crops. The cold that settles in is relentless. You start seeing snow in summer. Not a dusting. Real snow. Enough to collapse roofs and bend trees under the weight. Birds migrate at the wrong time or not at all. Animals grow thin. Even the river looks sluggish as though it's lost the will to move. Quirky detail in China government scribes report yellow dust falling from the sky. People cover their mouths with fabric, walk hunched in sandstorms that appear from nowhere. Somewhere in India, monks write about darkness at midday, followed by months of famine and strange illness. The planet is trying to tell you something, but it doesn't speak your language, only in symptoms. And here's a thought. If this happened now, if you woke up tomorrow and the sun suddenly dimmed for over a year, how long would it take before panic set in? You know, once TikTok stopped working and you ran out of canned ravioli. But in 536, there's no word for global event. News travels by foot, and people don't understand the skies well enough to guess at eruptions or ash clouds. All you know is that the gods must be angry. You look for omens in goat entrails. You burn incense, pray louder. Nothing works. What does work sort of is denial. Your village elder insists this will pass. It's a cold snap, he says. My grandfather saw one like this. You want to believe him, but your neighbor's son just died of something like scurvy, and the berries you used to make into jam are just gone this year. Even the bees don't seem to be buzzing. And you know what happens without bees. You're not alone in your despair. Across the Byzantine Empire, records begin to paint a picture of confusion. Soldiers are getting sick. Horses aren't strong enough to travel. Messages slow to a crawl. Diplomats report bizarre weather in every direction, endless clouds, crop failure, a sickly yellow tint to everything. One courtier notes that Constantinople's famed gardens haven't bloomed. Not a single flower. A big deal when your imperial image depends on roses and perfume. Still no one panics yet. Because humans are good at hoping, even when they shouldn't be. And then the real hunger begins. Grain stores deplete. Salted meat goes rancid. You try stretching soup with bark, then with dirt. You trade a good wool tunic for a single fish. You eat the fish eyes, too. Somewhere in northern Italy, entire communities are reported to have abandoned their villages in search of something, anything, growing elsewhere. One medieval writer describes famine so great that people forgot the names of the saints. Oh, and a quick sidebar, want to know what early medieval sunscreen was made from crocodile dung? That's right. Even while the world was falling apart, someone out there was smearing reptile poop on their face and calling it self-care. Anyway, back to the cold. By now, you're waking each morning hoping it's all been a dream. But the dark haze remains. Your stomach growls in a way you know isn't sustainable. You try not to think about it. Because if you do, you'll notice that your ribs are showing. And so are everyone else's. You don't say it out loud, but you're scared. Not of death, exactly. Just of what comes before it. And still the sun does not return. You breathe in and the air tastes like soot. It's not just the dimness anymore. There's a sharpness to the wind now, a kind of chemical bite that stings the back of your throat. Your clothes, what's left of them, carry the smell of smoke, even though no one's lit a fire nearby. That gray haze clinging to the sky. It's not fog. It's ash. Fine volcanic particles drifting invisibly across the continents, settling onto rooftops, into wells, into your lungs. You don't know it, but the world has been wrapped in a volcanic shroud, the culprit, that's still debated in scholarly circles. Historians and geologists have been throwing theories at each other like it's an academic food fight. Iceland, Central America, the tropics. Some believe it was a volcanic double punch beginning with a colossal eruption somewhere in the northern hemisphere, possibly Iceland followed by a second blast a few years later in the tropics. If true, you're basically living through Earth's worst hangover. You've never heard of Raboul or Ilopango or Krakatoa. You don't need to. You just feel it in your bones. You rub the dust from your eyes as you trudge through fields that no longer behave like fields. The soil is hard-packed, crusty. Strange grayish particles are stuck to the stalks of your barley. You cough again. Everyone's coughing now. Not like the usual winter sniffles, this is deeper, wetter, harder to ignore. You see a baby with black around its nose, too tired to cry. The skies don't just darken. They turn weird colors. Historical accounts talk about sunsets glowing deep blue, even green. The Chinese scribes note that the sun looks like through a veil of silk, eerie and cold. And at night, stars are dimmer, Northern lights appear in places they shouldn't. You might be tempted to think the gods are sending signs, but after the 5th month of this, even the priests stop offering explanations. A Byzantine observer, let's call him your ancient equivalent of a weather app, writes that the sun shone without brightness, like the moon. Another bemoans that fruits do not ripen and grain just won't grow. And here's a thought. If fruit is a luxury, now imagine trying to explain avocados on toast to someone living in 536. The weirdest part, you might be walking on volcanic fallout that traveled over 2,000 miles to get to you. Particles identified in Greenland ice cores and Siberian lake beds match those found in far-off tropical volcanoes. The Earth coughed up a planetary-sized dust storm, and you're living inside the cloud. Still, there's no Twitter, no breaking news alert, no satellite image to explain the grayness. You just have your instincts, and they're screaming that something unnatural is happening. You start to notice the animals acting strange. Chickens stop laying eggs. Dogs whimper without reason. Birds vanish. You remember hearing somewhere that animals can sense earthquakes or storms before they happen. If that's true, then you wonder what they're sensing now, what's just beyond the edge of the dark horizon. Meanwhile, your neighbors are whispering that it's punishment. Maybe a sin you forgot to confess. Maybe some cosmic debt finally being collected. You'd laugh, but there's nothing funny about how everyone's starting to look thinner. Gaunt cheeks, pale lips, that far-off stare like people are watching something inside their heads instead of around them. Here's your fun fringe detail of the night. Some ancient texts suggest people began hoarding salted locusts. That's right, locusts. Because when grain fails and pigs die, you turn to bugs. And when the bugs run out, well, let's just say the squirrels start disappearing too. You help your uncle haul a sack of old lentils up the hill to trade at market. Except the market isn't bustling anymore. Just a few hollow-eyed vendors offering meager bundles of dried roots and mushrooms. No spices, no fruit. One guy's trying to sell cheese made from goat's milk and tree bark. You don't ask how. You don't want to know. Historians still argue whether it was one mega eruption or a series of mid-sized blasts that layered ash into the stratosphere. Either way, the result is the same, a cooling blanket wrapped around the planet. Not a comfortable blanket, a suffocating one. They call it a volcanic winter. You just call it your life now. You try to ignore how quiet things have gotten. The birdsong is gone. The bells in town ring less often. Even the dogs bark less. At night, there's only the wind carrying that strange, scorched metal scent like someone left a blacksmith's forge running in the sky. One morning you wake to find black snow. Not metaphorically actual snowflakes dusted with fine soot. It falls like something out of a fever dream, collecting in the eaves of your roof and the creases of your cloak. You wipe it from your sleeve and stare. No one says anything. Because what can you say? The scholars of your day, they're just as confused. They don't have climate models or seismographs. They have dreams, omens, star charts, and they're panicking. Ancient Chinese astrologers begin drawing symbols of cosmic imbalance. Zoroastrian priests warn that the world has tipped too far into darkness. Even the Roman bishop you heard about has begun fasting publicly. Because if the sun itself is dying, maybe you need to go down with humility. And here's the twist. It's not just the light that's missing. It's the rhythm. You don't know when to plant anymore. The calendar means nothing. The moons look warped. Crops germinate late or not at all. One morning, a neighbor digs up a shriveled potato and cheers until they realize it's rotting from the inside. You stop asking what day it is. You just measure time by how many meals you've skipped, or how many people didn't wake up, and still no end in sight. Some days, the haze thins just enough that you start to hope. You think you see blue in the sky. You run outside and blink upward like a thirsty animal. But it's an illusion. The clouds thicken again by afternoon, and your little spark of joy flickers out like a candle in a cold room. And that's when you start to hear the rumors. Things are even worse in the cities. You overhear it at the edge of the market, if you can still call a few desperate traders huddled around a burned-out stall a market. A man with hollow cheeks and cracked hands is muttering about Constantinople, about Rome, about cities that once pulsed with life now choking on famine. Apparently, even the great empires have empty granaries. You don't need details. You see it in the way people are arriving in your village, stumbling in with no goods to trade, just skin stretched over bone and eyes that look past you. You ask where they're from, and they tell you the roads are lined with the dead. Towns are empty. Bakeries have stopped baking. Bread, that basic symbol of civilization, is now more myth than meal. And maybe the worst part, the bread you do find is weird. It's no longer the soft, warm loaf you used to enjoy with honey or dipped in stew. What's available now is a lumpy, sour slab made from anything that can be ground acorns, old barley tree bark, sometimes even clay or dirt. Yes, dirt bread. That's real. People start baking with powdered earth, thinking it'll stretch the flour. Instead, it stretches the limits of human digestion. One bishop somewhere tries to outlaw the practice, claiming it's heretical. But let's be honest, when your kids are crying from hunger and your stomach sounds like a thunderstorm, heresy starts looking pretty edible. In the countryside, entire families abandon their homes to follow rumors of food. A man who heard that a monastery 3 valleys over had a hidden supply of cheese. A woman who swears the river gods will bless anyone who fasts for 7 days. You don't believe her, but you haven't eaten in 2. You think about stealing. Not because you're bad, but because your survival instinct is louder than your morals now. You eye a neighbor's chickens, counting them silently. One disappears that night. You never ask. They never mention it. Historians still argue whether this global famine was entirely volcanic in origin, or if the climate disruption was worsened by other forces, early plague, crop disease, economic breakdown. Some suggest it wasn't one eruption, but a sequence of major volcanic events between 536 and 540 that turned the entire decade into a slow-motion disaster. You're not debating this. You're just trying not to starve. Well, the Roman world. What little remains of it is in freefall. Justinian, emperor of Byzantium, is still pushing his ambitious wars to reclaim lost Western territories. But his armies are hungry, and the state coffers are bleeding gold to fund grain shipments that keep arriving too little too late. You imagine soldiers looting the very people they're sent to protect, and honestly, you don't blame them. In Gaul, bishops start organizing what little remains of the social order. Churches become soup kitchens, even though there's often no soup. They bless what little you bring. Sometimes that's a handful of boiled moss. Sometimes it's boiled leather scraped from old saddles and softened into something vaguely chewable. Meanwhile, the concept of money starts to feel ridiculous. Who needs coins when there's nothing to buy? Instead, the economy turns primitive. You trade tools, cloth, even stories. You tell a particularly vivid tale about the time the sun turned blue, and in exchange a widow gives you a chunk of dried root. You nibble it slowly. It tastes like bitter dust. You almost cry from gratitude. Quirky detail time. In some regions, people turn to brewing alcohol as a survival tactic, not to escape, but because fermented grains resist spoilage. So you might find yourself sipping the weakest beer of your life, not for fun, but because it's calories. And calories are now the only currency that matters. You pass a group of children sitting on the ground, drawing shapes in the dirt. They look thinner than they should. One of them draws a loaf of bread and names it lunch. You smile weakly, but the image haunts you for days. You dream of food now. Not just eating, but the ritual of it. Warm ovens, crackling crust, butter melting. Your memories feel like hallucinations, almost offensive in their richness. You wake up stomach hollow and chew on your sleeve just to feel something on your tongue. And through it all, there's a growing sense of something breaking, not just bodies, but societies. In the absence of stable food supplies, governments lose control. Local lords hoard grain and riots break out in what's left of the cities. There are reports of mobs storming granaries not to take food, but to destroy what little remains out of fury. If they can't eat, no one should. Meanwhile, religious leaders grow louder. Apocalyptic sermons boom from stone churches and wooden pulpits alike. Repent, they shout, as if guilt will fertilize the soil. This is the end of days. You want to believe them. It would make the suffering make sense. But you suspect the truth is simpler. The earth is just tired, and it's taking everything down with it. You help bury a neighbor who died in her sleep. She was kind to you once, gave you her last apple months ago. You don't cry, your body doesn't waste water anymore. You just press a rock to mark the spot and whisper thanks. It feels like a ritual from a lost civilization. Maybe it is. Food is now sacred. Every seed, every root, every crumb. You pick at tree bark with your knife, scraping lichen to boil. You share it with a stranger, not out of charity, but because the act of sharing reminds you that you're still human. Barely, and still the ash falls. You don't hear the news about Justinian in a scroll, or from a royal courier. It arrives on the cracked lips of a wandering merchant bundled in furs too thin for this new bitter spring. The emperor's still fighting wars, the man mutters as he sips hot water like it's wine. While half the empire eats grass, you blink. Not because you're surprised, but because your eyes are dry from wind and smoke. War now. You think of soldiers marching in sandals across lands with no food, no sun, no warmth, fighting for territory while their stomachs claw at their ribs. It sounds insane. And yet, back in Constantinople, Justinian I, ruler of the Byzantine Empire, is doing just that. His grand project, restoring the Roman Empire's lost western provinces, is already underway. In the past few years, he's sent generals like the brilliant Belisarius to conquer North Africa and parts of Italy, rebuilding Rome's glory. But glory doesn't feed people. While the emperor clutches at his imperial dream, the people suffer. The city itself is under pressure. Constantinople, usually teeming with vibrant markets, is quieter now. Traders are scarce. Food is harder to come by. And the imperial court is getting nervous because famine doesn't care about golden thrones or mosaic-tiled halls. And neither does disease. You hear another whisper, barely a rumor, that ships are docking in port with sick sailors, that rats have been seen pouring out of grain barges. No one pays it much mind. There are always sick people, always rats, but your gut twists. Something feels off. Historians still argue whether Justinian's wars accelerated the spread of disease or were already doomed by the famine and climate collapse. But from your point of view, it's all tangled together, a kind of perfect storm. The emperor wages war, the sky won't clear, and your fields lie still. And oh, the taxes, you almost forgot about those. Justinian's campaigns are expensive. Gold is pouring out of Constantinople like water from a cracked jug, and someone has to pay for it. That someone is you. Or more likely the small landowners and farmers across the empire who are still expected to send tribute grain coin even if there's no grain left to give. You overhear a tax collector arguing with your village elder. His horse is starving and so is he. But the law is the law. If you don't have wheat, he says with a cracked voice, we'll take wool, or metal, or timber. Something. You give the man a crust of dried root, and he accepts it with shaking hands. It's not just about money. It's about keeping up appearances. The Byzantine state must seem strong, stable, invincible. But underneath the marble and silk, the empire is fraying. The roads are more dangerous. Robbery is on the rise. Some cities have stopped sending envoys. In others, entire neighborhoods are empty, their doors swinging open in the cold wind. A quirky little fact in Constantinople, some aristocrats tried importing peacocks during this time, not for food, but as exotic pets and status symbols, even while their servants starved. Imagine polishing a bird cage while your cook is boiling tree bark stew. And yet somehow the state staggers on. It's inertia, maybe. Or stubborn pride. Or divine luck. Justinian orders new laws, new buildings, even a new church. The magnificent Hagia Sophia, a marvel of engineering and sacred geometry. You've never seen it, but you hear stories. Light pouring through domes. Marble pillars that gleam like moonlight. A cathedral rising while the world outside burns. Some call it hope, others call it blindness. Meanwhile, you can't shake the feeling that something's coming. That this darkness, this hunger, this eerie quiet, it's the prelude to something worse. You're not wrong. You hear again about sickness in the port cities. They say it's worse than usual, that people are dying faster, bleeding, fevered, that entire neighborhoods are boarded up and silent. Some say it's divine punishment. Others say it's bad air. Most just say it's coming, but not quite yet. Right now, you're still focused on surviving the day. You try to patch your boots with animal sinew. You trade the last of your dried herbs for a cracked pot. You boil snow for water even in spring. You watch your cousin eat clay in secret. She doesn't know you saw. You don't mention it. And through it all, Justinian keeps pushing. His legal reforms reshape the empire. His generals win battles. But his people, they're eating leaves. You find it oddly comforting to know that even emperors can't command the sun to shine. That no one, not even a man in golden robes, can fix this. A neighbor tries to pray the sky clean. He burns incense and chants something about light returning. You sit beside him, not because you believe it'll work, but because it's something to do. You close your eyes and imagine the warmth of the sun again. The buzz of bees, the scent of fresh bread. You can almost feel it. Almost. But then the wind shifts and that dry sulfuric smell returns. You open your eyes, still gray, still cold, still ash, and still Justinian marches west. You hear it first as a whisper. A sailor stumbles into town with sunburned arms and yellowed eyes. He collapses near the well, and no one rushes to help. They've heard the rumors about a sickness spreading through the ports, about death arriving not with war but in silence. He tries to speak. You catch a word, Alexandria, then another plague. The wind carries his words away, but they stick with you. The plague of Justinian has arrived. You probably don't know it by that name. No one's naming diseases right now unless it's curse or judgment. All you know is that people in your village are starting to sweat through their clothes. Their eyes go glassy. They cough up blood. They swell in strange places under the arms, along the neck, between the legs. They die within days. Historians still argue whether this was truly the first outbreak of bubonic plague in human history, but the evidence is chilling. DNA samples pulled from ancient graves suggest Yersinia pestis, the bacterium responsible for the later Black Death, was already present in the 540s. And it didn't just show up quietly. It arrived like a sledgehammer. In Constantinople, bodies piled so high in the streets that officials ran out of burial space. They dug trenches. When those filled, they dumped corpses into old cisterns. Some chroniclers claim 10,000 people died per day at the peak. That's like losing an entire town. Every morning. You wouldn't believe it if you weren't starting to see the same signs where you live. A merchant's child starts coughing, and within a week, the whole household is dead. A baker starts feeling dizzy mid-need. You help carry his body to a ditch 2 days later. There's no time for funerals now. No candles, no hymns. Just a silent drop into the earth covered quickly before the sickness spreads. The eerie part. The disease doesn't discriminate. Rich, poor, holy, wicked, it takes them all. The monk who chants prayers over your village gets sick first. The innkeeper who always watered down his ale dies next. Then a child. Then your cousin. You stop keeping count. The symptoms are unlike anything you've seen. Buboes, the grotesque swellings, turn black and hot. Fevers rage. Some people babble nonsense before dying. Others go stiff and quiet. A few seem to recover only to collapse hours later. You start sleeping on the floor further from your family, hoping it'll spare them. It doesn't. Quirky historical footnote. Some people believe the disease spread through bad dreams, that the plague could float in through your window while you slept and take you in your most defenseless state. So they began sleeping upright heads, slumped forward in chairs, terrified of lying down. You try it once. It doesn't help. And then the fear sets in. It's not the fear of dying. You've been living with that for months. It's the fear of being alone, of watching everyone around you vanish, leaving you behind in a world that's colder, darker, and now quieter. You can't even trust animals. Cats die. Dogs die. Rats, the rats seem to thrive. They crawl through granaries and under thatch roofs, their beady eyes blinking in the gloom. You try not to think about what they're carrying, about what's living in their fleas. Historians still argue whether the trade routes helped accelerate the spread, especially the grain shipments from Egypt to Constantinople. Ships infested with rats and fleas may have created a perfect transmission network. While people starved, the plague spread with terrifying efficiency, riding on the very trade goods meant to keep the empire alive. And still the empire tries to keep going. Justinian himself falls ill. For weeks, no one knows if he'll live. The imperial court descends into chaos. He survives miraculously, but the damage is done. The plague has shaken the foundations of power. His wars stall. His economy crumbles. His people, your people, are vanishing. In your town, you start seeing more wagons carrying the dead than carrying goods. Markets shut down. Roads empty. People stop talking to one another. You cross the street when someone coughs. You bury your face in cloth soaked with vinegar. You burn incense just to mask the stench of decay. The world smells like rot and smoke now. One morning you wake up to a village so silent it makes your ears ring. You walk through empty streets past shuttered homes, wondering who's still alive behind those doors. You knock once, twice. No answer. A dog barks in the distance. Then nothing. It's like walking through the ruins of something that ended without a bang. A slow-motion apocalypse. A scholar once wrote that the plague of Justinian killed somewhere between 30 to 50 million people over 2 centuries, returning again and again in waves. You don't know numbers like that. But you know this: every face you see now could be the last one you ever recognize. And yet, somehow you still get hungry. Even in the middle of death, your stomach groans. You search for food, hoping plague hasn't touched the cellar beneath the mill. You find a sack of moldy grain and say a prayer before boiling it. You eat it slowly. You don't care that it tastes like mildew and guilt. And here's the weirdest thing: you start to adapt. You cover your nose with cloth. You boil your tools in fire. You eat garlic raw because someone said it helps. You avoid crowded places. You learn to check for the telltale swellings before getting too close. You treat everyone like they might already be dead. That's survival now. One evening, you light a tallow candle and sit near the door, listening. Not for voices, not anymore. You're listening for the creak of the plague cart, the soft shuffle of boots dragging another body away. You hear it pass. You blow out the candle, and you wait. You get used to the smell of smoke. It lingers in your clothes, your hair, even your skin. Not the warm, crackling fire smell of roasted meat and toasted bread. No, that's gone. This is the sharp, choking scent of burned bodies, sometimes mixed with rosemary, sometimes with sulfur. The plague's solution is fire. Burn the dead. Burn the clothing. Burn the homes they died in. You walk past a house where flames lap the roof like a slow-moving wave. You don't stop. You don't ask who lived there. If they were lucky, they weren't alive when the torches came. But let's rewind a little. You're starting to realize something else is breaking besides health crops and sunlight. What's shattering now is trust. The world feels suspicious. People stop visiting their neighbors. You see someone stumble in the road, and no one helps them. A man collapses outside the church, begging for water. People walk around him in silence. You watch from your window, clutching a crust of food you can't taste anymore. Historians still argue whether these behaviors, this collapsing of social bonds, were temporary survival mechanisms or signs of a permanent shift in how communities functioned. Some suggest that the mass trauma of plague, famine, and cold reprogrammed an entire generation's emotional instincts. And you just know your neighbor has started padlocking his chicken coop, even though the chickens died 2 weeks ago. You start to wonder what's more dangerous, disease or desperation. You've heard stories now. Stories of people turning on each other not out of hate but out of fear. A man poisons his brother for a bag of lentils. A woman buries her own child because she thinks he's marked. A priest refuses to anoint the sick. Even the church bell, once a sound of community, now rings mostly for funerals. And lately, it rings less and less, because there's no one left to ring it. Quirky side note. In this bleak parade, some monks actually try to document the events. They keep track of how many die in a week, how often the sun shines, which feast days pass without celebration. One monastery records that so few remain that even the bees have fled. Imagine being so lonely you notice bees have given up. And yes, bees do vanish, like so many other tiny unnoticed casualties of collapse. In the cities, power begins to shift. With death tearing through every class, nobles die beside peasants. And as whole lineages vanish, property laws scramble to catch up. If a landowner dies and no one is left to inherit what happens to his fields, his home, his goats, you hear of land being taken by the church, by strongmen, by squatters. In some places, survivors just move in. No ceremony, no paperwork, just this is mine now, and no one argues. And then there's the scavengers. You don't want to call them grave robbers, because that implies there's still treasure to steal. These people loot out of necessity. They pry gold rings from plague-bloated fingers, strip cloaks from corpses. Sometimes they burn the bodies after. Sometimes they don't bother. You see one digging through a shallow grave, and you want to be horrified, but mostly you're jealous. What if he finds food? Back in Constantinople, the court tries to reassert order. Justinian, miraculously still alive, starts pushing new laws, trying to control property inheritance, food hoarding, funeral practices. But how do you govern a city where half the population is gone? Some historians estimate the plague of Justinian killed up to 60% of Constantinople's residents. You don't need numbers. You just need to see the empty houses, the silent squares, the shuttered bathhouses. The empire isn't crumbling in war, it's rotting from within. Meanwhile, the sky stays gray. You almost forget what color blue is. You catch yourself staring at the clouds, wondering if that pale streak could be sunlight. It never is. Just a trick of the eye, an echo of memory. Your village begins to change in small, eerie ways. Children stop playing. No one sings anymore. You hear weeping at night. Once you find yourself laughing at a joke someone tells, and you stop horrified by the sound of your own joy. But there's still work to do. You chop firewood, though there's less need for it in this unnatural cold. You mend tools. You boil water. You help bury more people. You count your food. Every day is a math problem. If you eat this, now will you starve next week? The one bright spot, you're not alone. One morning, a traveler arrives from the south. She survived the sickness, swears by it. Her face is pocked, but her eyes are sharp. She brings dried figs and a story. She says the sea is calmer now, that in some towns life is coming back, that a sunbeam touched her hand. You stare at her like she's reciting myth. But that night you dream of sunlight, and when you wake up, your room smells like something clean. You find it was just the soap you buried last winter. But still hope smells like lemon and rosemary now. Historians still argue whether the plague's psychological impact was worse than the physical devastation. The trauma of stacking bodies, watching entire communities vanish, wondering if the earth itself had turned against humanity. It left scars deeper than any wound. You know this because your dreams aren't dreams anymore. They're just replays, faces you've lost, places that don't exist. You sometimes wake up talking to people who've been dead for months. You don't even feel embarrassed. A fringe theory pops up around this time that the veil of ash, the sickness, the famine, they're all signs that the heavens have shifted, that we're no longer under the same stars, that the world has entered a new age but left most of its people behind. And maybe that's true. You look around, and what used to be familiar now feels alien. The buildings lean a little more. The roads are quieter. The river's edge creeps in. You feel like a stranger in your own life, and still, you survive. You chew on dried bark. You sip thin soup. You light your candle at night and listen. Not for plague carts. Not anymore. You're listening for signs of change. You wake up one morning and something's different. It takes you a minute to figure it out. The air smells cleaner. Not sweet exactly, but less heavy, less sharp. The kind of air that doesn't sting the back of your throat. You step outside and for a brief second, you think just maybe you see the sky shifting. Not blue, not yet, but a lighter kind of gray. A gray with ambition. You stand there squinting upward as if your stare alone could summon the sun. A full year has passed since the sky first dimmed. You don't mark time by months anymore. You count by losses. The cold months, the hunger months, the fever months, the burning months, the emptiness months. But now there's a pause, a gap, like the world has taken a breath and is waiting to exhale. No birdsong yet, but you swear the silence sounds softer. Historians still argue whether this slight warming, this glimmer of atmospheric recovery began around the year 537 or a bit later. Some argue it wasn't recovery at all, just a pause between disasters. But you don't care what the record says. You care that the ice around your water bucket isn't solid for the first time in weeks. You care that you haven't seen a funeral cart in days. You take it as a sign. So do others. There's a slow, cautious emergence from hiding. Doors creak open. Children peek out. People start talking in hushed voices, asking questions like, "Did you hear the river isn't frozen anymore?" Or, "Someone saw green moss on the north slope," or, "I think my cousin's cow is pregnant." Cows, moss, rivers. It feels absurd to get excited over these things, and yet, these are the new miracles. Even the monks, those ever-diligent chroniclers of death and doom, start writing about change. One scrawls, "The sun rose today, and for a moment there was warmth." You imagine him pausing after that line, unsure whether to call it divine intervention or just good luck. You don't know whether to feel relieved or suspicious. You've lived through too much now. One warm day could just be a trick, a memory. But your skin doesn't lie. You feel heat, faint but real, and then the food rumors begin again. Not the desperate ones. Not the salt the locusts and prey kind. This time it's different. Someone claims their grain sprouted. Another says the apple trees are budding tiny green nubs clinging to scorched branches. You walk to the edge of the forest to see for yourself. You brush away some ash, and there it is, a shoot, a defiant sprig of green. You laugh out loud, and it surprises you. It's not much. But it's more than you had yesterday. A quirky fringe tale makes the rounds. Someone claims a group of villagers kept their crops alive by singing to them every morning. You snort. But a week later, you catch yourself humming while weeding your patch of scraggly roots, just in case. Even trade starts to trickle back in, cautiously. A traveling blacksmith comes through town with mules and tools and a few dented pots. He tells tales of warmer winds in the south of ships starting to sail again. Someone asks about Constantinople. He shrugs. Still there, he says. Still coughing. And then one day you smell bread. Real bread. Not bark paste. Not mildew-ridden mash. Bread. You follow the scent like an animal heart pounding. It's coming from the priest's house. He's baked a single loaf using the first harvest of spelt. He breaks it into pieces and shares it with everyone. You chew slowly, reverently. You close your eyes and imagine you're in the time before, even if just for a few bites. Historians still debate whether the slight climate uptick around 538 was due to volcanic particles finally settling, or because the Earth's natural systems started rebalancing. You just know that the days are getting longer. The snow melts faster. The air feels thinner, less oppressive. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you don't dream about famine. You dream about planting. The elders call a meeting. The first one in over a year. It's small. Half the village is gone after all. But those who remain agree to try again. To till the fields, to patch the roof on the granary, to fish, to forage, to hope. You volunteer to help re-dig the irrigation ditch. Your hands are stiff. Your back aches after just an hour. But when the water flows through the trench for the first time and soaks into the dry earth, it feels like you're watching magic. There are still fears, of course. Still talk of the sickness returning, or another winter like the last. But it doesn't stop anyone from working. You've learned that fear doesn't freeze you, it just makes you careful. You wash your hands more now. You boil your food. You leave space between sleeping mats. You've become fluent in survival. And yet there's one more transformation happening, not in the land, but in the way people speak. For the first time, they start to tell the story. Not just what happened, but what it meant. People begin to assign names to it. Not science exactly, but structure. The great darkness. The cold curse. One woman calls it the year the sun fled. Another simply says, when the sky forgot us. Quirky note. In some remote mountain villages, people start painting symbols on their doors, runes meant to welcome the sun back. Sunbread shaped like little golden wheels is baked and left out as offerings. You try one. It's hard, crumbly, but sweet with dried berries. It tastes like resilience. And finally, someone smiles at you on the road. Not a polite nod. Not a grim look of mutual endurance. A real smile. Teeth and everything. You feel awkward returning it. Your face isn't used to the motion, but you smile back anyway. Maybe, just maybe, the worst is behind you. The earth hasn't healed. The plague still lingers. The sky still flickers between moods. But for the first time, you feel like you're moving forward, not just holding still. Like the story is no longer about what you're losing, but what you might rebuild. You take a breath, and this time it doesn't hurt. You hear laughter, not much. Just a soft chuckle from the neighbor's hut, followed by the unmistakable thud of something falling over, and a squeal of joy. You freeze. It sounds so out of place, like music in a graveyard. But there it is again, laughter. Messy, human, alive. You peek in and see a child chasing a chicken. Yes, a chicken. A real, living, clucking ball of feathers that somehow made it through the past year. The child catches it, hugs it like a toy, and the mother, hair, thin eyes hollow, lets out another giggle. You smile. There's a feeling now. One you haven't let yourself name yet, relief. You're not thriving, not exactly. but you're no longer dying either. The ground is soft enough to plow. The trees have stopped dropping ash and started sprouting tiny leaves. You see the first wildflowers on the path to the river, those tough little blue ones that grow no matter what. They feel like a secret handshake from the earth you made it. But making it through isn't the same as being whole. The trauma still lingers like smoke in an old house. You don't sleep much. You wake at the slightest creak. You still flinch at coughing. You hesitate to touch people, even loved ones. The world is warmer, yes, but you are not healed. Historians still argue whether the survivors of 536 to 540 suffered from what we'd now call mass psychological trauma. No one had language for it then, no therapists or journals. But you see it in the way people stare too long at nothing, in the way they hold on to food a little too tightly, in the way some never speak the names of the dead. You carry that silence with you too. But life demands attention. The fields need planting. The fences need mending. Someone has to rebuild the kiln. You volunteer mostly because you need something to do with your hands. The clay feels cold and sticky, familiar, comforting in a weird way. You mold bricks, stack them, fire them. The oven coughs out black smoke and you smile at it like an old friend. And with labor comes rhythm. Days blur together not from chaos, but from routine. Wake, work, eat, rest, repeat. You remember this cycle from the before times, but it feels different now. Like wearing a shirt that used to belong to someone else. Familiar, but heavier with memory. And here's something strange: new people start to arrive. Travelers, stragglers, survivors from villages that were wiped out completely. They bring stories, old songs, and sometimes seeds. One man offers an onion bulb like it's sacred. You treat it like it is. You plant it gently, whispering something over the soil, even if you don't believe in magic anymore. Quirky trend popping up across regions. People start naming their crops. Not metaphorically, literally. This is Edda, the barley sprout. This is Gregor, the apple tree. It's part superstition, part therapy. If you name something, maybe you'll care for it better. Maybe it won't die. You don't mock it. You plant a potato and call it Carl. And Carl thrives. But rebuilding isn't just about food. You notice people painting again. Someone daubs red ochre across a ruined wall. Not a scene. Just shapes. Patterns. Lines that look like wind or fire or hope. You stare at it for a long time and something in your chest loosens. Art feels defiant, unnecessary yet essential. Even music returns. At night, someone plays a lyre near the old well. The strings are frayed and the melody wanders, but it holds everyone's attention. You sit in the dirt, knees pulled to your chest, and listen. When the song ends, no one claps. They just breathe, deep, slow, unafraid. You find a scrap of parchment and begin writing down what happened. Not everything. Not yet. Just flashes. The smell of burned bread. The sound of coughing behind closed doors. The day you found a single egg and cried while eating it. You don't know why you're writing. Maybe for future you. Maybe for someone else. Because someone will live after you. That thought used to feel like a threat. Now it feels like a promise. Historians still debate how literacy and record-keeping shaped the recovery of post-crisis societies. Some regions reformed quickly around monasteries and scriptoria, where written knowledge was preserved. Others relied on oral memory stories told by firelight. You hear one tonight, a boy recites the tale of how his grandfather scared away the sickness with garlic and loud singing. Everyone laughs, and then you remember. His grandfather died last winter. It doesn't matter. The story lives, and slowly the world opens again. The river thaws completely. Fish return. You spot a heron tall and solemn, watching the water like nothing ever happened. You see green in the distance. You smell rain before it comes. It doesn't stink of ash anymore. You build a small shrine, not to any god in particular, just a quiet space of stones and feathers and bones, a place to remember. Others leave tokens too, a child's doll, a cracked ladle, a handful of dried berries. Together, it becomes a monument to endurance. One night a storm rolls in, not of ash, but thunder. Real rolling thunder. Rain crashes down and soaks everything. You run outside and let it hit your skin. Cold, clean. You taste it. It's water, plain and sharp and miraculous. You laugh like a fool. So does everyone else. You sleep better that night. And in your dreams, you don't see death. You see sunlight streaming through trees. You see fields swaying in wind. You see your hands older but steady planting something new. And next to you others. People who endured. People who remember. You wake with a word on your tongue beginning. The day you see the sun again, really see it. You almost don't believe it. It's early, and you're out in the field checking on Carl, the potato. He's looking good, by the way. You stretch, wipe your brow, and then you feel it warmth. Not just the lukewarm haze that's been flirting with spring. This is actual, honest, undeniable sunlight. You tilt your head back, and there it is, piercing through the clouds like a sword made of gold. You gasp. Not dramatically, just a short, stunned intake of breath. Like your body forgot how to react to joy. And you're not the only one. People spill into the streets. No one says anything at first. They just look up. One woman drops to her knees. A kid starts spinning in circles, arms wide. An old man, normally quiet, starts sobbing into his beard. You join them, overwhelmed, basking in that glow like a houseplant brought in from the cold. The sun feels like a promise. Historians still argue whether this atmospheric clearing marked the official end of the volcanic veil or just a temporary reprieve. Either way, by 541, climate patterns had started to stabilize. The skies grew less choked, the rainfall more predictable. It wasn't a return to normal, it was the birth of a new rhythm. And it saved you. But the sun brings more than warmth, it brings movement. Trade picks up. The few roads that are still passable see carts rumbling by loaded with wool, iron, wine, and salt. A group of Syriac merchants arrive in your town bringing spices and news. There's rebuilding in Alexandria, some peace in Antioch, war stirring elsewhere. But cities are breathing again. One man offers you a fig. You bite into it. It's sweet and sticky, and tastes like summer memories from a life you're no longer sure was yours. For a second, the horror of the past years melts off your tongue. And then something even more shocking happens. The markets return. Not the desperate barter-based chaos of survival. Actual stalls, scales, haggling. You walk past a row of makeshift tables and see beans, dried fish pottery, and a red scarf that's far too pretty to be practical. You buy it anyway. You've earned a little softness. With commerce comes currency again. Small bronze coins mostly. Some shiny, freshly minted. Others worn and bent relics of a time before ash and silence. People talk about trade routes opening, roads being cleared. There's even a whisper of ships docking in Ravenna and Carthage. You also hear something strange: taxes. Yes, that thing. Somehow, somewhere, bureaucrats survived too. Justinian's empire, though battered, never quite died. He's still on the throne, older, wearier, but no less ambitious. The Eastern Roman Empire continues to churn, issuing decrees, rebuilding roads, collecting silver. Historians debate whether his resilience prolonged the empire or stretched it too thin. You don't think much about it, except when someone shows up asking about land boundaries and grain tithes. A quirky historical detail: after the plague, new legal codes were introduced to address the chaos. There were rules for claiming abandoned land, laws about remarriage after sudden death, and even debates about whether a slave who nursed a dying master had earned their freedom. You hear about one farmer nearby who inherited 5 goats and a field after nursing his lord's widow back to health. He now insists on being called Sir Goatfather. Not all of society snaps back into place. Some settlements vanish for good, entire communities swallowed by famine and fear never to be repopulated. But others, like yours, reweave their fabric slowly. The old rhythms return: sowing, harvesting, baking, weaving, singing. And with the return of pattern comes the return of belief. People start praying again. For a while, faith had frozen. Churches stood silent. Rituals went unspoken. Now hymns echo again through stone halls. You see a child light a candle for a sibling they never knew. A carpenter hangs a wooden cross above his new door. You help rebuild the chapel roof, even though you're not sure you still believe in divine plans. But you do believe in community. Historians still argue how religion morphed in this era, not just in dogma, but in tone. Some say Christianity shifted toward a darker, more judgment-heavy worldview. Others argue the opposite, that it became softer, more forgiving. You notice both. Fire and brimstone sermons grow louder, but so do messages of love, of survival as a form of holiness. The children, you marvel at the children. A new generation is being born. The first babies you've seen in years. You hold one warm and squirmy fists like tiny roots, and you can't stop staring. Their cry is high-pitched and furious, but it's the most beautiful sound you've heard all month. Life didn't just resume, it renewed. The elders, those few who made it through, sit together more now. They talk often, share memories. You listen in scribbling notes. Someone mentions a girl who outran a plague cart on foot. Someone else swears they once saw the sun darken and the moon turn red on the same day. The facts don't matter. The storytelling does. You find yourself becoming the collector of memories. Your journal grows thicker. You press leaves between the pages. Sketch the potato named Carl. Record the name of every person you've lost and every person you've met since. You no longer write out of fear of forgetting. You write to honor what was endured. And here's the strangest part: you begin to dream of tomorrow. Not just survival, but thriving. You sketch out ideas for better homes, windows that face east to catch the morning light. You design an irrigation plan with your neighbor. You build a swing for the children. You hum as you work, and sometimes the tune becomes a song. The trauma is still with you. It always will be. But now it walks beside you instead of weighing on your back. The world doesn't feel like a grave anymore. It feels like a garden, half wild, half tamed, stubbornly blooming through the cracks. You step outside one evening and the horizon is burning again, but not with fire, with color. Reds, oranges, purples spilled across the sky like the gods finally remembered how to paint. You sit on a log, wrap your too pretty scarf around your shoulders, and watch the day close like a book you don't mind rereading. It's not just a good day, it's the best one in a long time. And something inside you says more will come. You find yourself drawn to water again, not just because it quenches thirst or washes away ash, but because it feels like the world is slowly coming back to life, like you're reconnecting with something essential and ancient. The river, once frozen and lifeless, now murmurs softly, its surface sparkling under the reborn sun. You kneel at the bank, dipping your hands into the cool flow. The current slips through your fingers, carrying leaves, insects, and tiny fish darting beneath the surface. The smell of wet earth and growing things surrounds you, fresh and full of possibility. You think about how just a few years ago this same river was a mirror of destruction, choked with debris, covered in ice and ash. Now it breathes again, and so do you. But the recovery isn't just natural, it's human. Villagers build simple dams and channels to manage the water for their crops. You help reinforce a dike near the edge of town, its wooden beams creaking in the breeze but holding strong. You watch as the water nurtures the parched fields, turning barren soil into patches of green. It's painstaking work, but every splash of life feels like a small victory. Historians still debate how water management contributed to post-crisis recovery. Some say these small-scale irrigation projects were crucial, while others argue that many communities remain too fragile to sustain them. You don't care about the debates, you care about the muddy boots, the shared smiles when a field finally blooms. Quirky local legend tells of a woman who during the worst months saved a secret spring hidden in the forest. She kept it clean and fed the village from it despite the risk of discovery. They call her the Water Witch, though no one believes she wielded magic, only courage and stubborn hope. That hope grows as the seasons turn. Spring returns with a splash of wildflowers. Bees buzz again, tentative at first, then with increasing confidence. The air hums with the low drone of life rebuilding itself. You pick a bouquet of daisies and wild thyme, feeling a smile tug at your lips. Small miracles, but they add up. Children learn to swim in the river's shallow pools, laughing as they splash one another. You watch them and feel a strange mixture of joy and envy, their innocence untouched by the recent horrors. You wonder what kind of world they'll grow up in. Trade routes along the waterways gradually open too. Flat-bottomed boats ferry grain, wool, and tools between settlements. A merchant from the north arrives with a barrel of salted fish, and you barter for a piece of soap, something so simple yet almost luxurious. Religion adapts alongside nature and society. You attend a gathering near the riverbank, where people offer thanks not just to gods, but to the earth and water itself. Hymns mingle with the sound of flowing water and birdsong. The clergy speak of renewal, mercy, and balance their voices softer and more hopeful than before. Historians still argue whether these evolving spiritual practices reflected genuine theological shifts or were pragmatic adaptations to desperate times. You sense it's a bit of both, a fusion of old beliefs and new needs. The healing extends to your body too. Your hands, once cracked and numb from cold and hardship, regain strength. You notice the lines on your face soften when you smile. The weight in your chest lifts, replaced by cautious optimism. You don't forget the losses, but you carry them differently now, like stones in a pocket, grounding you rather than dragging you down. One night, under a sky bursting with stars, you sit by the river with a friend. You share stories, laughter, and plans for the future. You realize that connection more than anything else is the true balm for the wounds inflicted by the great darkness. The river keeps flowing unstoppable and steady, just like the resilience growing within you. You wake one morning to an unfamiliar stillness. The usual chatter of birds is absent, replaced by a heavy silence that presses down on the village like a thick, damp blanket. You step outside the morning mist, clinging to your skin, and feel an uneasy chill that has nothing to do with the weather. The skies have darkened again, but this time the air smells different, sharp, metallic, and tinged with an acrid bite. The ash from years before is a faded memory compared to this new menace. Word spreads quickly, a fresh wave of plague has arrived. It's not the slow, creeping shadow of starvation or famine this time, but an invisible enemy, swift and merciless. The townsfolk whisper names you barely understand: plague, pestilence, black death, terms that bring terror even in their foreignness. You watch as the sick are carried away in carts, their faces pale and eyes glassy. The village healer tries potions and prayers, but the sickness marches on. You can feel the weight of despair settling in once more, heavier and colder than before. Historians still argue whether this new outbreak was a direct consequence of the earlier year's weakened state or a separate catastrophe entirely. Some say it was an inevitable punishment. Others insist it was nature's cruel cycle. Either way, you know the pain intimately. In the chaos, old superstitions flare. People avoid touching each other. Walls are marked with strange symbols, and a few even claim that cats and dogs are the true carriers of the plague. One eccentric neighbor insists on wearing a mask stuffed with herbs and spices, claiming it protects against evil spirits. You can't help but chuckle even as fear gnaws at your insides. The village rallies, though, trying to protect the vulnerable and care for the ill. You join efforts to quarantine the sick, distribute clean water, and keep the fires burning to purify the air. It's grueling and heartbreaking work, but necessary. In the midst of the suffering moments of kindness, flicker hands held across the distance, whispered prayers, shared bread. You cling to these threads of humanity as tightly as you can. The plague takes many, but it also changes those who survive. Some emerge with hardened eyes and steely resolve. Others with a quiet, fragile hope that refuses to be extinguished. You hold on to that hope. It is, after all, the last light in a world shrouded once more in darkness. The plague fades slowly, like a bad dream dissolving with the dawn. The village, bruised but unbroken, begins the slow work of healing once more. You walk through streets that bear fresh scars, the scent of disinfectant mingling with wildflowers pushing through cracks in the cobblestones. You notice how the survivors have changed, not just physically, but in spirit. There's a quiet resilience in their eyes, a hard-earned wisdom etched into their faces. The losses are too many to count, yet life insists on pushing forward. Communities come together to rebuild homes, clear debris, and plant new crops. You see neighbors sharing seeds, tools, and stories, weaving a tapestry of hope from threads of sorrow. Children born after the worst play freely their laughter, a balm to weary souls. Historians still debate whether this period marked the true end of the late antique crisis, or simply a pause before new challenges emerged. Some argue that the transformations during these years laid the groundwork for medieval Europe, while others see it as a fleeting moment of recovery. Among the ruins, new ideas take root. Trade routes slowly reopen, linking distant regions once more. Craftsmen revive lost techniques, Artists experiment with fresh styles. You help build a small market stall selling pottery painted with bold, hopeful patterns. One quirky tradition that has taken hold is the annual Ash Day Remembrance, where villagers gather to share stories of survival, light candles, and plant trees. It's a somber celebration, acknowledging the darkness while embracing the light. Religion adapts again, blending old rituals with new interpretations. You attend a service where the priest speaks not of wrath, but of renewal and compassion. The congregation sings hymns that rise like gentle waves, soothing the wounds of the past. You find solace in these gatherings, feeling the collective heartbeat of a community determined to endure. The past lingers, but it no longer defines you. As seasons turn, you dream not just of survival, but of flourishing. The world may never be the same, but in its scars lie the seeds of something new. A future shaped by the strength of those who refused to give up. The seasons continue their steady march, and with them the world reshapes itself beneath your feet. You begin to notice changes not just in the village, but in the broader landscape of power and culture that surround you. The grand cities, though, still bearing wounds from the decades of turmoil, start to stir. Constantinople rebuilds its walls with renewed vigor. Its markets buzz with merchants trading silks, spices, and stories from the farthest reaches of the known world. The Eastern Roman Empire, often called Byzantine by later historians, adapts with surprising agility, melding old Roman order with new influences from the East. Meanwhile, the Western Roman Empire lies fractured, a patchwork of kingdoms carved out by newcomers and locals alike. The remnants of Rome's grandeur now stand as silent witnesses to a past era, their marble columns cracked but not forgotten. You hear whispers of the rise of new powers. Germanic tribes who have settled and mingled with local populations, their leaders forging alliances and claiming crowns. Historians still argue whether these so-called barbarian kingdoms were destructive invaders or vital contributors to Europe's rebirth. You suspect it was a messy mix of both. Culturally, you notice a fascinating fusion. Latin traditions blend with Germanic customs. Christian theology absorbs pagan motifs. Art and language evolve in unpredictable ways. You see a carved wooden amulet depicting both a Christian cross and ancient symbols, proof of this tangled web of belief. One quirky tale from this period tells of a king who insisted his court wear animal masks during feasts to honor the spirits of the forest. Whether superstition or early performance art, it adds a splash of color to the austere chronicles. Trade routes that once faltered now pulse with new life. Caravans traverse the Mediterranean rivers, teem with barges, and coastal ports become hubs of exchange. The economy is fragile but waking from its long nightmare. You find yourself both participant and observer in this unfolding drama. The world feels bigger, more complex, yet strangely familiar. The cycles of destruction and renewal have etched themselves into the soil and the soul of the continent. As you sit by the fire one evening, watching embers drift upwards like fleeting memories, you realize the story of 536 and its aftermath is not just about suffering, it's about transformation, adaptation, and the stubborn persistence of life itself. The years press on, and with them, you sense a world still wrestling with its scars, yet forging ahead with cautious hope. The memory of darkness lingers like a shadow at the edge of the campfire's glow, but it no longer defines the present. You witness how the small victories, harvests, saved trade routes, reopened, communities rebuilt, gradually weave together into a new tapestry of life. People grow more inventive, developing better tools, new farming methods, and improved architecture that can withstand future tempests. You help build sturdier walls and learn to read the stars for weather predictions, skills passed down with care. Religion remains a steady current beneath everything. The church grows stronger, its influence reaching farther into daily life, offering both comfort and control. But within its walls, debates simmer how to reconcile faith with the harsh realities you and your neighbors endured. Historians still argue how these tensions shaped medieval spirituality, with some seeing seeds of reform and others warning of dogmatic rigidity. Despite all, laughter returns more fully. Festivals revive, blending old customs with new twists. You dance under lantern-lit skies, the air thick with music and the scent of roasted chestnuts. You catch the eye of a stranger whose smile feels like a secret promise, and for a moment the weight of history lifts. Trade continues to expand. You handle goods from distant lands, ivory, amber, even strange silks that shimmer like liquid moonlight. Each item tells a story of connection beyond your village, a thread in the vast web of human resilience. A quirky tidbit sticks with you, a traveling bard who tells tales of a giant bird that once darkened the sun, a metaphor for the volcanic cloud that cloaked the world years ago. The story is embroidered with dragons and heroes, and though you know the truth, you can't help but smile at the magic of myth-making. You feel the pulse of change all around. The world is no longer simply surviving. It is slowly, quietly thriving. You rest your head on your hands, watching twilight settle, and wonder what stories the future will tell of these times. The sun dips low, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the land you now call home. The air is cooler, softer, a gentle reminder that time moves on, carrying both sorrow and hope with it. You sit quietly, feeling the weight of the years settle deep within your bones, but also the spark of life that refuses to be extinguished. You reflect on the journey you've endured from the choking ash skies of 536 to the tentative rebirth of your village and beyond. The memories come unbidden, the hunger that gnawed at your belly, the loss of friends whose names you whisper in the night, the days when even hope seemed a cruel joke, but also the laughter that broke through the gloom, the hands held in solidarity, the quiet moments by the river that stitched your soul back together. Historians still debate how exactly these cataclysms reshaped the world, whether they marked an end or a beginning, a collapse or a transformation. But you know what matters most: life stubborn and persistent, carving its way through the darkest soil. In this new dawn, you sense the pulse of a world, awakening, a tapestry, woven from threads of resilience, adaptation, and human connection. The scars remain, but they are part of the story, a testament to endurance. As night falls, you imagine the generations yet to come, children born into brighter skies, who will one day walk these fields with lighter hearts. You smile softly, knowing the future holds its own challenges, but also its own promises. You close your eyes, feeling the cool breeze against your skin, the faint hum of life all around. The world is vast, mysterious, and ever-changing, but tonight it feels quietly kind. Word count 151. Slow wind down. Now as you settle deeper into your pillow, let the echoes of this journey fade gently into the background. Breathe in the calm that follows the storm, the soft rhythm of a world slowly healing. Remember, the past, with all its shadows, is but one chapter in the endless story of life. Let your mind drift, carried on the quiet wings of hope, and know that even after the darkest night, dawn will come again. Sleep well, friend. End of script. Sweet dreams.